HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Retire Smart, Retire Happy, Finding Your True Path in Life by Nancy K. Schlossberg, EDD. Read by Janet Metzger. Introduction. An image of retirement is easy to conjure up thanks to some familiar cliches. A farewell party involving the presentation of a gift certificate, gold watch, or engraved plaque. Longtime colleagues promising to keep in touch. An invitation to come back and visit us any time. The retiree smiling and speaking enthusiastically of finally getting in some fishing, skiing, time with family, or a second honeymoon. Fade out. Pan in again a few months later, and we have several possible scenarios. An energized retiree enthusiastically digging into new activities, inspired to engage in new accomplishments, excitedly meeting the challenges of a new lifestyle. Or a depressed soul, deprived of work routine and therefore unable to figure out how to fill the days, with whom to have lunch, and how to balance the checkbook on a reduced income. It is clear that work is the centerpiece of our lives. Whether post-retirement life is positive or negative, work almost always defines who we are, where we go each day, how we live, what kind of car we drive, the size of our home, and even the values we honor. For years we prepared for work and then, on a daily basis, structured our lives around it. What most of us have not prepared for is the end of full-time work, whether it is paid work, homemaking, or raising children. If anything, daily life in our times, with its clearly defined goals, routines, boundaries, and schedules, conditions us to have difficulty adjusting to the flex time of retirement. How can this time of life be made rewarding instead of psychologically paralyzing? That is what this book is about. It is this potential that makes retirement, for those who are in reasonably good health with adequate income, a time of challenge, a moving toward instead of a moving from. As a professor of counseling psychology, I have devoted most of my career to studying transitions. I developed a model that serves as a lens for examining adult transitions, which include everything from the geographical transition of moving to another town or state, the transition of job loss, and the experiences of adults who make the transition to student life by returning to school, among others. But when I distanced myself from my professional routine, it suddenly became clear that, like moving or going back to school, the transition to retirement is a major one that deserves the same type of attention I had devoted to other phases of adult life. I realized it was possible to apply the generic framework I had developed to a fuller understanding of the retirement transitions. Armed with this background, I thought I possessed a crystal ball. I believed that I had retirement aced, right? Wrong. I realized that I had to rethink what I had extrapolated from my studies of change. Back at my desk, I reviewed my previous work on transitions. Despite the apparent differences in all the transitions I had studied, I identified many factors that cut across all transitions. Studying my own work helped me deal with my overriding questions: what next? Now what? How will I find my path in retirement? Why write a psychological book about retirement, and for whom? I am writing for all retirees seeking new ways to lead a fruitful life, and for prospective retirees, many of whom are destined to feel let down if they do not give some thought to retirement before it happens. Even for those recent retirees who claim they have never been happier, there is an enormous period of adjustment as they move into uncharted territory. Retirement is scary, and why shouldn't it be? So many aspects of our life are suddenly in flux. What time to get up, what to wear, when to take off for a coffee break, where and when to drop the cleaning off, when this is something you used to do regularly on the way to work. It is no wonder people feel discomfort. Retirement changes not only daily routines, but also your role as a full-time worker, relationships with co-workers, and, even more important, your very identity. It is difficult, uncomfortable, even depressing to know who you were, but not who you are. Retirement is like setting sail in a storm with little sailing experience toward a hoped-for destination. Like sex, retirement is something we think we should be able to do easily and well. In fact, there is much bragging about how easy it is. Unlike sex, however, there is no magic Viagra pill to ease the way. Some retirees report lying to friends, saying, "I have never been busier. In fact, I don't know how I had time to work." This optimistic picture may aggravate and intensify the unease of those who have not found their new path, making them question why they, too, can't get a life. Many ask, "How can I find meaning in my life? Will I ever feel excited about the day again?" The answer is yes, and this is what this book intends to do. Help listeners identify the issues, the changes, the discomfort, and come out feeling that they can find their true path in retirement. This book is especially helpful to two major groups. One, those anticipating retirement who want to identify their needs, take stock of their psychological resources, and define life paths that make sense for them. And two, current retirees who are struggling to understand why they may feel discontented or confused about their lives. The book offers suggestions and appropriate steps needed to change daily routines, the environment, and relationships to ensure a fulfilling life. Is this necessary even for people who are or have been highly successful? Apparently so, for the publisher of a newspaper told me, "We need a book like yours. Write it to me, since that is where I will be in a few years. I want to know the retirement story before I live it." This book reflects the only thing we know for sure about retirees. There is not one retirement story, just as there is no single retiree and no single retirement path. Each story differs. For example, one woman said, "I am at 6s and 7s. I don't know what to do with myself now that I am retired." Hollow was the phrase someone else used to describe how he experienced retirement. And yet another person, unable to continue work as an editor because of poor eyesight, described retirement as a string of hours to be counted. On the other hand, Bob, an optimist, saw retirement as an adventure. One of the many men I interviewed, Bob said retirement was filled with surprises. Originally, he viewed it as not a big deal, just another phase of life. Today, 4 years later, he realizes it was big. It was a series of transitions for which he was unprepared. We will hear Bob's story and others as they take risks to make this phase of life happy, meaningful, and productive. How I studied retirement. To learn about the world of retirement, I interviewed 100 men and women from different walks of life, including residents of mobile home parks, gated communities, and condos, executives from Fortune 100 companies, and blue-collar workers. In addition, I assembled 4 focus groups around each of the major aspects of the retirement transition: leaving work, changing relationships, body, and self. Although these interviews provided a glimpse of retirement from many points of view, I do not make any claims for the universality of my findings. When I started this project, I was apprehensive about interviewing people about a transition I was personally experiencing. To my amazement, that very situation helped the process work beautifully. Instead of interviewer and interviewee, we became collaborators in trying to understand what was transpiring in our lives. Almost every retiree thanked me, and many said the interview had been therapeutic, probably because we were all in the same boat, struggling to make sense of this time of life. Many of the people I interviewed were, in fact, having the time of their lives. At one point, I thought I should seek out more unhappy campers, but I decided that using a more random approach to selecting retirees was equally valid. After all, the purpose of this inquiry was not to catalog the experiences of retirees in some quantitative sense, but to learn from those who have arrived at a fulfilling retirement lifestyle. Finally, conducting the research helped me to confront my own retirement dragons and to arrive at some basic truths that I hope will help others as they confront theirs. Retirement is a new, untried experience. For many people, it is the first time they have meaningful choices regarding time, space, and mission without a map or script. Retirement is a transition like other transitions, which includes letting go of the past and searching for and creating a new life. Retirement transitions are difficult because they force us to answer questions we may have thought we'd already answered for the rest of our lives. Who am I? Do I matter? Do I have a focus? How should I spend my time? Am I competent to cope with whatever the future brings? Retirement may unexpectedly transform our relationships with colleagues, friends, and neighbors. What may have been predictable and fulfilling relationships may suddenly seem to be out of sync if one person retires before his or her partner, or when they retire at the same time but realize they have different agendas. Retirement is paradoxical. For some, this newfound freedom can be freeing. For others, it engenders anxiety. Retirement, like other transitions, results in many surprises, both positive and negative. Retirement involves a series of transitions, making it both complicated and exciting. An overview: what you can expect from listening to this book. There are many paths you can take to master your retirement. I have identified 5 different ways that individuals confront retirement. These paths provide a roadmap for A, those considering retirement, which path to take, as well as for B, those already there who may be asking whether they are on the right path. This book will help you to identify your path and even figure out how to change it. Each chapter will move you forward in this process. Demystifying Change, Chapter 1, shares my personal retirement story as a way to illustrate the transition process, which is applicable to all transitions. Looking Inward, Chapter 2, provides a way to understand what's at stake in one's private world during the retirement transition. Building Relationships, Chapter 3, looks at the changes and importance of supports and relationships. Discovering Your Path, Chapter 4, helps you determine which retirement path you want to take. Taking Charge, Chapter 5, shows you how to garner your resources to negotiate your chosen path. Learning Retirement Lessons, Chapter 6, shares wisdom about retirement from all those interviewed, from the literature, and from my own experience. Looking Forward, Chapter 7, helps you assess how you can make retirement work for you. Final Thoughts, the concluding chapter, consists of my hope for all of us. Which path will make retirement the time of your life? If there is one lesson I can pass on from researching and writing this book, it is this: the only person who can answer that question is you. and the only person capable of finding your true path in retirement is also you. I hope this book helps. 1. Demystifying change. A while ago, when a newspaper reporter called to interview me about a project that dealt with grandparents raising their grandchildren, I was delighted to describe the specifics of how these grandparents were establishing support groups for other grandparents. The interview was lively until the reporter asked, "What is your title?" I almost gagged and was unable to get out the words Professor Emerita. I fudged and said, "I am consulting and doing some teaching." The truth, which I had not yet accepted, was that I had retired. Because of this, I had no idea who I was. I only knew who I had been. It was an awful moment. Now I say with great pride, I am a retired professor from the University of Maryland. What is the process that helped me move from gagging to feeling pride? Why, I wonder, does the process of restructuring a life take so long? The answer, I have discovered, is that restructuring involves change, and change, good or bad, expected or unexpected, unsettles our lives, shakes us up, and requires time before we adjust. Retirement is change, big time. Just as workers change jobs and careers throughout their employment, so retirees frequently change course. "What do I want to be when I grow up?" is a phrase many new retirees use about themselves, half-jokingly. One reason the transition to retirement is difficult for some is because retirement really is not one but many transitions. After all, our work gave us an identity and a lifestyle, and even mapped out our interpersonal relationships. Leaving a job involves more than simply ceasing to work. As a first step in dealing with changes brought on by retirement, it is important to understand transitions in general. I found that all transitions bring up similar issues and reactions. Transitions change our lives by altering our roles, relationships, routines, and assumptions, and our reactions shift as we move onto new paths and leave old ones. Our ability to cope with these changes depends on our resources, which change over time. Transitions, a definition. Transitions are events, like moving, divorcing, or retiring, or non-events, like not being able to retire when you expected, or not having grandchildren. Whether or not your retirement was or will be an anticipated event as mine was, or an unanticipated event like Bob's, when Congress decided to stop funding his agency, or if your expected retirement failed to occur because you could not afford to retire, you're a non-event. Your life will be changed in many ways. My studies of non-event transitions reveal that they are often not obvious. A non-event refers to something you reasonably expect will happen, but doesn't. Its absence can change your life. Because non-events are generally hidden from view, they are not acknowledged, celebrated, or ritualized in any way. The actual parting from a company, your retirement, is an event, often ritualized by the gold watch. The non-event, not having colleagues keep in touch as you expected they would, or not getting the wished-for part-time job, carries with it no ritual, even though it might be just as significant as the retirement event. Whether retirement is an event or a series of events, it changes your life in significant ways. Thus, it qualifies as a transition. A helpful way to figure out how large a change retirement has been or will be is to examine your roles, relationships, routines, and assumptions before retirement and after retirement. The more they are altered, the more you have to adjust to and cope with the transition. Even in the case of a non-event retirement, That is, you are unable to retire as you expected. You are in transition. Although your roles, routines, and relationships have not changed because you are still at work in the same job, your assumptions about the way your life would evolve change dramatically. Sometimes, when nothing happens, everything changes. So, back to Bob. After Bob's role as a professional working for Congress ended, he struggled until he developed an entirely new professional role. As his job ended, so did his work relationships, although his network of family and friends remained the same. Later, when he entered massage school, he developed new relationships with faculty and other students. His routines shifted radically. Accustomed to dressing in a suit and tie, working at an office from 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., and coming home with a briefcase full of work. As a student, he dressed casually, without a tie and jacket, and developed new routines conforming to his school schedule. Finally, Bob's assumptions about himself and the type of lifestyle he wanted changed dramatically. He was no longer the Washington superworker type, but a more relaxed, introspective person. As Marlene, a retired office manager, wrote, "We are now in different worlds. My relationships with those who were significant during my working years have changed. I no longer see many of those I used to see on a daily basis. Instead, I see my husband during the day, something that rarely happened before. My routines, including what to wear, when to get up, how to structure the day, are entirely different. I dress in casual clothes most of the time. My schedule no longer has regularity to it. My role has changed from overwhelmed administrator to underwhelmed volunteer. And of course, my assumptions about myself and the world have changed. I never imagined that, yes, there is life after work." If you have not retired, you might begin to think of the degree to which you expect your life to change. As one woman said, "It is important to think very concretely about what you will do the first day after work ends. It is important to build in structure so you are not at sea." For those already retired, the more your life was altered, the more you have had to adapt. Riding the roller coaster. The transition process. Adjusting to major transitions takes time, sometimes 6 months or even a few years. For example, if you interview a person before retirement, during the month of retirement, 6 months after retirement, and again 2 years later, you will hear entirely different responses. What is this process? Is it identifiable? What can you expect as you negotiate retirement transitions? Let's look at the different responses as you move out, move through, and move into a new life. Moving out, letting go. Leaving a work role can be eased if you remember that your past is not obliterated when you embrace the future. Helen Rose Fuchs Ebaugh, an ex-nun turned sociologist, studied the process of leaving a role. She interviewed former doctors, dentists, police officers, air traffic controllers, teachers, military personnel, athletes, professors, nuns, convicts, prostitutes, and transvestites. She defined the role exit process as one in which a person disengages from a role that has been central to that person's identity. The process of ceasing to think of oneself as a dentist, reporter, traveling salesperson, and so forth is painful for some and a relief for others. She also found that most people who consider leaving a role experience definite periods of letting go. First, they experience doubts, then begin to seek alternatives, reach a turning point, and finally identify with a new set of roles. Your accomplishments and achievements can continue to be sources of pride. Ebaugh wrote, "To become well integrated and a whole person, and X must incorporate that past history into the current identity. X's, therefore, share the fact that they must establish new identities that incorporate their past social status. Remember, you are still you. Your previous accomplishments can inspire you to achieve along your new path, whether in a part-time or full-time job, on the golf links, traveling, or even babysitting for grandchildren. The ease of letting go of a past role depends on the degree to which it was central to your identity. Clearly, my role as a professor of counseling psychology was central to my sense of self. Letting go of that and having nothing to go to created a vacuum. Friends warned that I would flunk retirement because I do not play bridge, tennis, or golf. I had been very committed to my work, much of which dealt with the subject of change. I was considered an expert. Integrating that knowledge into my retired lifestyle, I began researching and writing this book. In addition, I put the knowledge to personal use. I talked myself into believing that I could deal with ambiguity, that I love not knowing exactly what I will do, where we will live, how we will live. I began looking forward to the future. Moving through, searching. The struggle of emotionally disengaging from the past is completed when individuals begin to identify themselves in their present roles. For Stan, it was relatively easy to begin thinking of himself as an artist rather than a reporter because he had been a Sunday painter. For years, he had looked forward to the day when he could take his painting seriously. Though he was delighted to have the time to paint, it took him several years to change his self-description from reporter to artist. Disengaging takes time. For some retirees, time brings adjustment. For others, just the opposite may happen. Research indicates that those who voluntarily retire experience an immediate satisfaction stemming from the lack of pressure. However, over time, unless the retiree is well motivated and self-directed, there may be unstructured, empty days causing ups and downs. This vacuum is a period of neither here nor there, during which you are relinquishing one set of roles, relationships, routines, and assumptions, and struggling to figure out what next. Often, some of this period is used for grieving for what was and confusion over what might be. Some people begin searching for ways to recreate their past, whereas others use this period as a moratorium, a time of being suspended between what was and what is to come. My husband and I decided to move to Sarasota, Florida, where we had vacationed for years, soon after I retired. We were excited, but found the in-between phase long and difficult. On the first Saturday night in our new community, a friend invited us to a dinner party. The group, all of whom lived permanently in Sarasota, was lively and interesting. The hostess toasted our arrival in Sarasota and asked all of the guests to tell us their stories. They were eye-openers. A former cardiologist had volunteered to help teach in the biology department of a local college. At first, they let him run a projector. It took 3 years before he was invited to lecture and finally to teach. His wife, a former foundation employee, told us she enjoyed tennis and reading, and that she participated in the Arts Council. Another guest, a retired architect, now studied welding and had designed their house. His wife, a former TV personality, played tennis and actively participated in the Community Foundation. Although it had taken a minimum of 2 years to feel part of the community, they were all very happy in Sarasota and felt their lives were meaningful and full. Their advice? You must have patience. Give it time. I left the dinner party feeling we had met terrific people, all of whom I would love to see again, but I felt frustrated. I didn't want to spend 2 years before feeling connected. Where, I wondered, do you get patience pills? After 2 years...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?